my window this afternoon. And so they've just started banging right above me very loudly in the last like 5 minutes or so. So I thought I was good to go. But I think I'm going to give y'all a task. And then while you're doing your first task, I'm going to scamper up to a different room. So don't be alarmed if my scenery changes. It's all part of the plan. And I apologize for any banging that's distracting right now. So if you don't know me, I am Virginia Schutte. This is the third of four, like Eric said. I'm a science communicator. I got my PhD in marine ecology in 2014. I was doing amazing research in mangroves around the Caribbean mostly, and I absolutely loved my research career until I was like, wow, no, this is not for me. I miss talking to people. And so then I pivoted to a career in science communication, and I'm finding myself more and more using science communication tools to help science people with their career development. And this is just one lens through which you can view career development, right? Like a marketer or like somebody else could also help you with your CV and your resume in a different way than I can. But because I have helped people, in order to do science communication, you have to know yourself and you have to know who you're speaking to. And that's a lot the same when you're doing self marketing, when you're on the job market. You have to know your own story and you have to know. I'm sure you can hear that. I'm going to go ahead and move upstairs. You have to know the parts of your story that will resonate with the people that you're applying to work with. So I am going to move upstairs. That is the intro to me. While I'm moving, there is a link in the chat. This is to a document that I want us to build together today. And you'll notice that in the top of the document, there are two links to example CVs and resumes. I'm going to have us review those in a minute, but please do not look at those links this second. You can click on them, get the tabs open if you like, but I'm going to ask you not to spend time looking at those CVs or resumes on your own because I would like for us to do it together. So as Eric said, I want this to be much more of a webinar, much more of a workshop than a webinar, because I find that sitting and listening, doesn't do as much for me when I'm talking about creating marketing materials than it does for me to just sit and work on my own thing. So if you don't have your CV or resume in front of you, please locate it in digital form, or if you have a printout, if you have scrap paper in front of you so you can make notes for later. My goal with this workshop is for you to leave feeling like, oh my gosh, look at all these edits I want to make. Now I just have to go do them rather than leaving and being like, well, I hope I remembered all that. So let's do the work together so that when you leave, you can feel really confident about your next steps and upgrading your CV or your resume. As I said, they're doing construction just right out there. It just started this afternoon. I hope it's not too distracting. I also don't mind that I'm the only one on camera. I'm used to bringing enough energy to keep this up for the hour. So we're going to do about 30 to 40 minutes of work together, and then we're just going to have open Q&A. If you all want to pull up your resumes or CVs for specific feedback at that point, totally fine. If you have questions as we go, put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, whatever works for you, because I want to make sure, again, this workshop is meant to serve. I'm here to serve you. Eric has made this so that y'all get value out of it. So this is for you. And if you want to ask anything anonymously, just DM me and I will ask your question without your name attached to it. So feel free to do things anonymously if you like. All right. So I said I want to do this a little bit differently. That link that I put in the chat goes to a document that I would like for us to build together with notes for this workshop. So I am going to give you, this resource will remain yours if you want to edit it as we go. I would like for y'all to be putting your aha moments and your takeaways into this doc so you can all see what you're discovering together. Maybe something that really clicks for you. Someone else is like, I didn't get that from her words, but I totally see that that's a good point. So if you want to take notes in here, that's totally fine. If you want to make a copy and edit it so you can get really personal with your own thoughts, also totally fine. I'm going to take notes for you as we do this together so that you can have this document as a resource when we're done. And so it can be in your words what's resonating for you. I would rather not me say what works for me because I've been on the job market for a while. I've done this a bunch of times. Okay, so we are going to start. first thing to know is the average review of a CV or a resume lasts 8 seconds. And now this is a little bit context dependent, so I'm a little bit cheating because not always 8 seconds. Sometimes now they will have a first screening review of your CV or resume that's done by an AI or some kind of robot or something. And so that's not 8 seconds, that's just kind of automated computer stuff. We will talk about that in a minute. But the first time a human sees your resume, they are likely to spend only 8 seconds on it, okay? I'm actually gonna pull up a timer. And the first thing I want us to do, I'm going to switch tabs here in my shared screen to that top chemistry resume example. I'm using the I switched it from the lab technician to the research technician, but there's a bunch of different chemistry examples there. Pick any resume from that top link. And when I say go, I'm going to switch my screen. I'm going to time us for 8 seconds. I want you to review just the top half of that first resume. I want you to see what you can pull out of the resume in 8 seconds. And then I'm going to ask you, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to ask you to type in the chat or come off mute and tell me what impression you got from your 8 seconds, okay? It can be a word, a feeling, something you remember, okay? I just want you to get a feel for what 8 seconds feels like when you're looking at a resume. So this top link, the chemistry example, 8 seconds, starting now. Okay, that's already 8 seconds. So we're done. um, what did you get from that 8 seconds looking at that resume? If you want to put your impressions in the chat, if you want to say them out loud, I'm just curious, what did you get from those 8 seconds? All right, I don't see anything in the chat. Oh, there's something in the chat. They're currently a postdoc, have a PhD, done a lot of teaching. Excellent. So you got an abbreviated version of their story. You got their history. You just read the heading. I totally get that. Lab tech with 10 plus years experience. And now there are multiple chemistry examples on that website. So we might be reading slightly different ones when we have the postdoc and the lab tech. Okay, but you are able to get purple font. You are able to get something that you might remember within those 8 seconds, but it's none of the details. I know it's kind of a joke, the heading thing, but that's what you get. And then the postdoc PhD teaching, that's stuff that you can get from the way the headers are structured and how long the document is and things like that. The lab tech with 10 plus years of experience. So you're noticing that all the small font stuff, all the details, those are all just wash. And what people remember with the first impression is the headers and the major points. So potentially the last like couple positions plus what you currently hold, but none of the details, okay? Now that you've done that once, I want you to do it again. I'm gonna have us go to the second link in that Word document that I shared. That second link goes to, I think it's a microbiologist. And we're all going to be looking at the same CV there. So now that you've got your 8 seconds, you've done it once. I just want you to do it again and see if that 8 seconds goes by so fast. See what you pull from it after you do it a second time. Your 8 seconds is going to start right now. Okay, that's your 8 seconds. We're totally done. Tell me what you got from that CV. Mary Lee, you're cheating. Just kidding. You accidentally read this one the first time. That's okay. Postdoc with good teaching experience. Oh, that makes sense, Marilee, with your postdoc and done a lot of teaching. That's right. Postdoc who has won some awards and has some teaching experience, right? Okay, so we're all on the same page. We are all, even though we are not professional resume reviewers, even though studied PhD, BSc, they had a BA actually, I think, in biology, but yes, they have the credentials. So even though we are not professional resume reviewers, nor are we on a committee sifting through a stack of, let's say, I review 10, you review 10, we all review a different 10, and then we come together. When you are in a situation like that, and that's how your stuff is most likely to be read. If you are introducing yourself and the resume or the CV is a really, really important tool, that means it's because you're in a stack of applicants. The situations where your CV and resume are not such important tools are when you know the person, when you were invited to apply for something. So I want to focus on the situations where this is a crucial tool to make you stand out from a stack. More about work experience and responsibilities. Right. So the point that I want you to take away from this first exercise is just that the headers and the big stuff is what people look at first. Okay. So I'm writing in our live notes, 8-second review. I've got headers and emphasized things matter most. I also, people are using this really, really quick review as an initial glance. And you're not looking to pull applications to the top of the stack during this quick glance as much as you are looking to kick out people who are not good fits. And so if you are a good fit for something, that means that they're going to assess that based on your giant headers. So I'm going to say looking to eliminate bad fits with the first review. Quick review. This means that this can feel very restricting because let's say you are going to apply for 5 different positions. One's as a lab manager, one is in industry, one is as a postdoc, let's say. Those 3 positions alone, the duties are somewhat different for each. And so how you may present yourself, you might want to change that. But if what matters most is your headers and kind of your experience in this initial review, you don't really have control over that because your work history is your work history, right? So this is big, big point number 1. You are in control of your own story, or you should feel in control of your own story. What I mean is the titles that I see most people use on their website, on their resume, on their CV, when they introduce themselves, they classify their job experience based on the titles that were given to them by the people who write their paychecks. So I see people call themselves PhD students, or I see people call themselves research assistants or something, when really you are a microbiologist, or you're a biogeochemist, or you are an estuarine, I don't know, like estuarine flow researcher or scholar or something like that. There are all kinds of ways where you can take your job experience and you can change the title of yourself to be something that is more descriptive and matches you into the positions you're applying for. I know that can feel really uncomfortable because especially in academia, it feels like 10 people have to sign a piece of paper before you're allowed to do anything, right? Like when you are admitted to a grad program, so many people have to approve so many forms. For you to go from PhD student to PhD candidate, you have to pass exams, your committee has to sign, it has to be filed and approved. But you can seriously just name yourself what you like on your resume and your CV. No one is going to come after you. I have never, ever heard of someone getting in trouble for this. It will only get you in trouble if it's a lie. And so in order to take control, you have to be able to justify why that title belongs to you, which you should be able to do anyway, because people are going to ask you about it if you get the interview. So the point of the CV and the resume is not to get you the job, it's to get you to the next step. Right now, the first glance at it is to clear the like kick them out thing. Okay. So thing you need to do first is take control of your own titles and work experience. I want you to locate your CV or resume, and I want you to take, we'll give it a leisurely 10 seconds. And I want you to look at your instrument and I want you to evaluate yourself. Okay. When you are not yet. I'm going to set the timer. But when you are doing this, I want you to come out of it and I want you to write down 3 things about yourself that you get from your resume or your CV. These can be keywords. These can be like impressions of what your story is. But 3 things. I want you to write down like 3 things from 10 seconds, glancing at your instrument as it currently exists. Okay. So get ready to look at it and evaluate it for 10 seconds. I hope we're all ready. I can't tell because we're all off camera. 3, 2, 1, review. That's it. That's your 10 seconds. So I want you to take time to write down 3 things that you got from reviewing yourself. You don't have to share it in the chat if you, unless you want to, but if you want to put it in the chat, please do. I'm so curious what you're getting about yourself. Actually, keep those 3 things to yourself. I'm more interested in knowing how you feel about those 3 things and if they match the way you feel about yourself. Okay. I'm going to be quiet for a minute while you write down your 3 things. Think about your feelings and if you want to do something about it. I'm going to give you a whole minute to make some notes. Starting now. Okay, that's your 1 minute. I have a good question in the chat. I currently have my awards and recognitions at the top of your resume. Should we move further down to ensure people can get a good overview before getting too specific? Mary Lee, I don't know if you have permission to share your resume or your CV. If you want to, you can. But without seeing it, my answer is always it depends. I know that's so annoying, but I'm going to explain, so just stay with me. I think if you mean at the top, like underneath your um kind of well, it depends. I'll get into CV versus resume in a minute. But I think you absolutely need at least some of the overview, and it depends. So people have to know who you are right now, and usually they want to see some kind of like context placement, whether that means you're applying for an academic job with a CV and you have your education credentials right up top, underneath your education right now. Okay, great. Underneath your education. That's what I was looking for. So I think it depends also on what your awards and recognitions are. If your awards and recognitions are like best talk at the grad student symposium, that I would leave toward the bottom because that means you excel, but I think that's not as valuable as them understanding your positions. If your award or your recognition is the L'Oreal Fellowship for Women in Science postdoc or whatever that one is, that's descriptive enough and it ties into giving the story of you through which positions you've held now and recently, that I think that's an award or recognition that I would leave near the top. And so I think okay, rescinding my it depends, and I'm going to say definitively that people need to know your context broadly first. And so if your award and recognition contributes to that, leave it. But if it's an in addition to, or if it's a qualifier of your context, move it down to the bottom. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Great. Anybody else have, you're welcome. If you have any other thoughts or questions that you want to ask, bring up right now, please put them in the chat. Remember that you can DM me if you want to ask things anonymously. Okay. So you're in a stack of stuff. Someone has looked at your CV or resume for 8 seconds. They have determined that you are not a bad fit. And so you've made it to the next round where their stack goes from like 10 that they're reviewing to maybe, let's say, 5 that they think might be good fits. Now they have to pull out the top people to bring to the meeting for the hiring committee, and see, sorry, distracted by the construction guy moving around my backyard. So see who is actually going to be a good fit for the job. Okay, this is something we do in a minute. Can we put the picture at the top of the resume? Oh, what a good question. I find that pictures depend totally on application cultures, which depends where you're applying. So I lived in Germany for a couple of years after I got my PhD. And in Germany, people absolutely wanted your picture at the top. It was just customary. But I was applying for communication jobs and not academic jobs. In the US, who we're living in weird times. People have often said leave your picture off because so many review committees want to make it very easy to have a name and kind of demographic blind review, which means that some places will have hiring practices where they are attempting to reduce bias by being able to not have their reviewers look at names or pictures or things that identify whether you might come from a minoritized population. I don't know how much of that's going to stay and how that will all play out with all the government things that's happening with DEI right now. But I know that some places might still want to do that because not everybody is controlled exactly by all these executive orders coming out. So my general advice is try to see if you can figure out the culture of the space that you're applying to and what standard, and then fit in with what standard so that you can give the reviewers a really easy way to fit you into their review process, their expected review process. If I'm processing 10 of these, and let's say I've like blocked an hour to look through these 10 and prep myself to come to the hiring committee meeting later, if I encounter something that's not the format I expect and it takes me extra time, I may not give it the time that I should because I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. And, I get off my game a little bit. So figure out the culture of the place you're applying. If you can't do that through like listservs or social media or advice places, my general advice is to leave it off because then they can always ask you later, or they can go to your website and find it or something like that. Okay. Depends where you're playing. Yeah. Okay. So, right. What I want to do next is I want to go back to those exact same CVs and resumes that we already looked at. And I want you to use the links in this live document, and I want you to browse on your own a minute for each. And I want you to identify during that. Oh, I've got a question. I'm going to give the assignment first, and while y'all are doing the assignment, then I will look at this question, and we will address this question right after the assignment, okay? So, group assignment right now. I want you to go to that top link for the chemistry resumes, and I want you to take a minute. I'm going to start that timer again. I want you to take 1 minute. I want you to pick one of the ones on that site. I want you to review it for a minute. And then when you are done with that minute, because that's how long people on average use to determine if that person's a good fit. So this is like round 2 will be about a minute for the reviewer. When you're done with that minute, I want you to write down for yourself one thing you liked about your minute-long review. So one thing that they did well in their resume that you thought facilitated your review and understanding their story, and one thing that you feel like you would change if it were your resume, okay? So look at the resume first. That's the chemistry link. It's at the top of that document. Let me know. I will pull the exact link for you so that you can get it in the chat, and I'll be on the exact same page. I'm going to time you again for that minute. Then I'm going to give you a minute to write notes afterward. All right. So here's the link. Take just 1 minute to review this, and then I will come back with the next stage of this assignment. Your minute to review starts now. All right, your minute of review time is up. So I want you to step away from it and I want you to write down one thing that you thought went well about that review, like one thing they did in their resume to make it easy for you to review and get their story, and one thing you would change. Okay. I'm going to give you a minute to write down those impressions. All right, that's your minute to write down your impressions. Now, if you would like to share your impressions in the chat, I'm so curious what you are learning from your own review experience of these resumes. If you feel like they're great and there's nothing you would change, or if there are things that you're going to translate to your own documents when we're done. So if you want to write something in the chat, I'm curious if this is doing anything for you, if you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel overwhelmed. While you are doing that, this question in the chat, the best CV format for applying for a postdoc or an assistant professor job, what should be the ideal section order if you have research experience, publications, fellowships, and awards? Okay. Okay. Let's see. I want to see if other things come into the chat first. All right. I'm not seeing anything in the chat about impressions from y'all's review. Maybe you're just taking your time typing, which is totally fine. Here we go. For a chemistry lab assistant, the chronology of the positions they worked for and the type of work done was nicely written, but the education part was missing. Okay. So y'all are, I don't know your exact positions, but I know that you are scholars. I know that you do research. And yeah, the education part for researchers and scholars is so important. The biography was good and precise. Okay. So I want to get to this question in the chat. What should be the ideal section order if you have research experience, publications, fellowships, and awards? So I am used to seeing education at the very for a CV, for a postdoc and assistant professor, that's a CV. And that means education first, and then fellowships if they are related to employment, especially. I'm used to seeing that come next. And then I'm used to seeing research experience listed again, like employment, kind of elaborating on your the fellowships and kind of how you've arrived at this position. And then I'm used to seeing publications and grants somewhere in there. And then I'm used to seeing awards. However, if you have a lot of all of these kinds of things, there are ways that you can summarize them so that people can scan them. I will also say, well, let's get into the difference between a CV and a resume. So a CV in the United States is curriculum vitae, and it's something that's expected to be much longer and much more detailed than a resume. In Europe and in other countries, a CV is a word that they can use generally for even resumes. And so it gets a little it is a little bit harder to keep track if you are applying globally. So again, research the culture of the place that you are applying to before you submit your application. But in the United States, which I'm going to bias towards since that's where we are currently, CV is expected to be much longer, much more detailed. Resume is expected to be much shorter. CV is usually used in academic settings. Resume, in my experience, is used almost everywhere outside of academia. Let's see, I got my PhD in 2014, so I've been out for 11 years now. And so I've been graduated from college for, I don't know, it's been almost 20 years. And I have a 2-page resume. And what has happened to me is people have started to know me and my reputation. So I am hardly ever applying for things in a normal applicant pool, but I'm also a freelancer. And so I'm not sure how much that will apply to y'all. My resume is not needed to have all the details because people meet me somewhere, they see what I'm doing there, and then they translate that experience. Networking and all that is like a whole separate question that I'm totally happy to talk about. I have lots of opinions about it, but I want to stick to this example of when you are like really heavily relying on this instrument to do good things for you. So, resume reviewers should expect it to be short. CV reviewers should expect it to be long. So, if you are taking your 1 minute reviewing your CV, or even your 8 seconds reviewing your CV, 8 seconds is going to be a scan of the first page only, still. But for a CV, the 1 minute, I'm expecting them to go through the document and their eyeballs should hit your education at the top and your titles. They should hit your next section header and like the first word on the left column underneath everything. Let me just track this. Let me share my screen and show you what I mean. Okay, so we've got the live document here. Here we go. I'm going to switch us to this CV here. So if I'm reviewing this for a minute, I'm going to current position, postdoctoral fellow. That's all I need for now. Education, PhD, of course, BA. Oh, interesting, not a BS, but a BA. And it looks like, I don't understand why that's a BA because it looks like BS topics. All right, something we could ask in the interview if we care about going that far back in time. Scholarships and fellowships, I'm going to look at all these. So Santa Cruz, Utah, Pennsylvania, they've got a variety of experience. Lots of teaching, molecular biology, virology. Okay. More teaching, more teaching. So I'm going to skip down to coursework and training, workshop, teaching seminar, meh. Research experience, postdoc, grad student, technician. Okay. All in molecular biology, it looks like. Research intern. So they started early. Oh, and look, they've got publications already. Oh, they've got invited presentations. Okay. So my eyeball is staying in this left side of the page. I am not even in my minute-long review going to the right at all. I am hitting the headers. I'm reading the first line of the first one, and then I'm scanning the rest on the left side. I hope you can see where my mouse is when I'm doing this. So in my minute review of the CV, I would expect to have to scroll far enough to hit all of those sections that you mentioned in your question. Research experience, publications, fellowships, and awards. So because the CV is so long, I think the order matters less. However, I would look at people who have jobs in the place you're applying to. If they list their CV online, I would look it up and I would put it in an order similar to theirs. Or you could look at aspirational peers. So you're all like advancing in your careers enough that you should not think of yourselves as lesser than anyone. You should be thinking yourselves as deserving of having the next job, having full-time employment in the thing that you've been training in. And so calling them aspirational peers means people who have gotten something that's like something that you want, but you recognize that they're your peer too. Look at their CVs if they post them online, see what order they're doing things in, and then just use your good judgment after that. Everything's a gamble, but with a CV, order matters less because I'm expecting to scroll through. Okay, that was a very long answer. I hope that was illuminating. So CV and resume is shorter. And it's used in different places and applications than the CV, which is longer and more detailed and is specifically tailored for academic and research kinds of settings, in my experience. The other thing I will say about the CV is, even though it is expected to be longer and more details, you can use smart techniques to summarize things. So if you have like, grants and fellowships, you could just put in that header in parentheses right after that, total, like $1 million total or something like that. Publications, 19 total, invited talks, like X number of conferences or something. You can have summaries by section. You could also put a summary at the top where you say postdoctoral fellow with some lab, and you have a one sentence underneath that says your research specialty and kind of where you're headed or something. So if you feel like you've got this really long, unwieldy document, you can choose to use summary techniques if you want to make it easier for people to scan and get that summary information. Okay, so we've talked about the 8-second elimination round, the 1-minute pull to the top round. We've talked about resumes versus CVs. I want to talk about tricky situations. So, if you have a gap in your resume or your CV, most people want you to address that up front rather than leaving it off and like acting like it doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean that you have to put it in your resume or your CV. You don't have to put like, 2 years, like recovering from a car accident. Like, you don't have to list it as a life event on your resume if you don't want to. You could put it in your cover letter, for example, that you, I don't know, like you had this thing and you're excited to get back and, apply your like, so I think the gap doesn't have to be addressed in your resume or CV, but I think if you have a gap, expect to say something, be ready to say something about it. Gaps are often very personal. And so if you choose, like, if you do not want to share a personal history, I'm going to be an advocate for like, you don't have to unless you're desperate for the job, in which case, make your own decisions. And no one gets to judge you about that. You have to decide how to best take care of yourself. But if you don't want to talk about a personal situation, you are allowed to say something that's like, that was a really personal time for me. And what I really want to take from it is that it emphasized, I'd rather not focus on what was happening to me at that time, but I do want to focus on how I clung to my passion for whatever it is, to get me through that time. I was still reading papers. I was staying up on current literature. I was in the bars fighting with my researcher friends, even though I wasn't, holding the job that I thought I would have at that point. And so I felt like I have still kept myself in the community and been doing what I could to keep up with it. And I'm excited really just to like get back to using my skills so that instead of talking about all these things, I can be a part of making them happen, right? I didn't reveal anything about what happened to me during those 2 years or whatever the gap was, but I told them like a story about myself where it makes sense that this happened to me and now here I am applying for whatever job it is I'm applying for, right? That's your overall goal, is to tell your story in a way that makes sense, leading straight to them hiring you. You want to just get them there to that conclusion so that it's like a duh moment. They're just like, of course I would hire you. It makes so much sense. Okay. All right. So, other tricky situations. Let's see. Right. What do you do if you worked with someone that turns out to be a jerk? This one sucks. If you've worked with someone that turned out to be a jerk, I'm really sorry. That sucks all on its own. And I'm laughing because, like, that's happened to me. And if I don't laugh about it, I'm going to feel really sad and angry. So that's what's happening here with my face. Um, if this has happened to you, again, you need to do what takes care of you. Okay. If that means that you keep quiet about what happened to you or what that professor or whoever it is was like, I don't want you to feel like you are betraying yourself or the community, because what you're doing is protecting yourself. Okay. And if you feel a nudge of guilt, like, oh my gosh, I should be telling people so that nobody else gets trapped, fine. But make sure you're safe first, because otherwise you won't be around to tell people about, like, you won't, not like you're going to die, but like you won't be around in this career path to meet the people that might be influenced by that person in the future. Okay. So protect yourself first and do not feel bad about prioritizing your own safety. Okay. You have to be safe first. All right. So that's thing number one. Do what you need to do to get through it. And then if people ask you about it, you don't know their impression of this person. Even if you think it's so obvious that they're a terrible person, they steal students' papers or they discriminate against whoever it is, the person that you're talking to may not know that. And so you will need to think carefully about a way to talk about your time with that person that does not place you on a side for or against. For me, that mostly means strictly sticking to the job duties and how they unfolded, because those are objective, what happened to you, okay? If they invite you to say more things, again, be very careful because they might be inviting you because they are a gossip and they don't really have any opinions about this person one way or another. Um, but they definitely, if they're a potential employer, there's a power dynamic there. And if you tell them something, who knows what they will do with that information. So you may need to go as far as preparing a statement for you that you don't have to like have ready to read off, but it could say something as general as like, yeah, I'd rather not get into the personal aspects because, my personal life is like a thing that is, no, that's not how I would say it. I would say something like, because this has happened to me. So what did I say? Right. If people are like, oh yeah, I've heard that some people have not enjoyed working with person X. And I'm like, yeah, lots of people have had different experience. For me, I did the work and now I'm done. And I do want to make sure that I work with really good people in the future, but I can't really speak to anything that might have happened, with that person and other people. Right? So you're neither confirming nor denying what happened to you, but you're sticking to the work and you're letting the person have the information they have without getting anything else from you. That's the smart play when you're not sure if this person what they're going to do with information from you. Okay? So, again, I want to keep us up to speed. We have gone through the 8-second review and then elimination, the 1-minute review to pull to the top. We've covered resume gaps. We've covered tricky relationships. We've talked about a resume versus a CV. Okay. I think the next thing that I want to make sure we cover, I'm going back to my advice sheet, and I will put in some notes here while we're doing Q&A. We've got how review works, tricky points, your work, and you can make notes here for yourself. I want to talk about getting help really fast, okay? And then I'll open it up for Q&A. So just 2 more minutes, and I'm just going to open it up to be more of a discussion, to make sure we get all of your specific questions answered. So where can you get help with this? Your advisor, I hope, would help by reviewing your application materials before you apply. If you have never asked your advisor if they would do this for you, you should. Because I expect if my husband's about to get tenure and he's a professor and like he loves it when people come back who used to work in his lab and say, I'm about to apply for a new position. Can you review this for me? Because one, he's quick at it. So it's not like a huge time ask, but also he gets to check in with the students. He gets to see what they're doing. And for him, that's a reminder of what students in his lab go on to do afterwards. So he uses it as a measure of success that he can use to recruit further students. So don't feel like you're being a burden. If the professor feels like it is a burden, they'll just say no. They'll say, no, I don't have time to review it. And then you're good. Okay. So hopefully you're able to ask your advisor to review your application materials, including your resume and your CV. If not, hopefully you have an advisor that you trust, like an academic advisor in your unit or your college or your school or whatever. If not, or all of these things, hopefully you can go to the Career Center. And especially if you're getting out of academia, when I was leaving academia and moving into science communication, I had someone from the School of Mass Communications review my resume. And so they were able to tell me all sorts of things from a communications lens that I didn't have any experience with. And so I could see how to tell my story to get communications jobs, but it also helped me understand the kind of skill gaps that I wanted to develop on my own before I really started going for the big time jobs. So talk to someone, especially in the Career Center, that might be outside of your usual circles if you're looking at shifting out of academia and into something else where sciences may not be the only person who has a perspective on your application. Okay, so your advisor, academic advisor, career center, and then again, the same way that we are looking at these example resumes online, I just searched for example biology resume and example chemistry resume. You can look up examples and if you are like me, you will have opinions on everything you run across, which may help you have opinions on your own. So you can look up examples online. You can look up people who, again, are your peers or your near peers or your aspirational peers, review their stuff online. I know my resume is online for anybody to find. If you're curious what a science communication resume can look like, I can pull it up and show you if you really want to see it right now in this session. But find people that you admire. Look at how they're presenting themselves. See if there's anything that you could translate to telling your own story. And then the last thing I would say is, lots of people want to be full-time employed. The only people I know who don't want it are people who are already rich, and good for them. But if you are one of multiple people in your community who are applying for stuff, set up a review circle. Like swap resumes or CVs and then come back together and talk about, like, here's the specific advice I would have for you, but also like lessons learned that y'all have from the group, shared lesson learned. That was really helpful for me when I was especially starting to enter the job market. Okay, we are 12 minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to spend the rest of my time typing up notes in that live document. Again, this will be available to you afterward. It's not going anywhere. Does anyone have any questions that you would like answered? And again, we can get as specific or stay as broad as you would like. If you would like to ask anything anonymously, please DM me and then I will ask your question without your name attached. Should you include references on your CV? This is a good question. When I was first applying to college, I feel like that was a thing that people said you should do, but I have not seen that really anywhere since, because especially these days, the people who would be references for you on your CV are probably already listed, right? It's the people who, like, if you're in a lab with somebody, then they could just reach out and contact that person. And for all the jobs that I have applied for, they ask for a list of references separately so that you either enter the contact information of your references separately into an online form, or you provide it like as an email if it's not a kind of form system application. So I do not like to put them in because I don't want to spend the space of my CV and resume on references when I would rather have that go elsewhere. Okay, how can folks best tailor their CV and resume for text upload and machine readability? Thank you, I forgot about machine readability. Okay, so you need to be making your stuff in Word and then saving it as a PDF. Every word now if you use it, well, not Word, sorry, you need to eventually arrive at a PDF document. If whether or not you use Word or some open source, whatever, that's fine. But if you save it in modern day versions of programs that get you to that PDF, every word in that PDF will be searchable. And the way that machine readability works, and this is especially something that companies will do if they have if they're big enough to have an HR department, then probably someone in HR is going to be screening your stuff before it gets to a human reviewer. Thank you so much, Eric, for this reminder that this is how it works. Everything goes into a system, and computers will essentially, it's like, think of it like making a word cloud of everything that you have in your resume and then comparing it to a word cloud of the job advertisement. So this is what people mean when they say tailor your CV or resume to the job ad. They don't mean make sure you're a good fit. They literally mean take the words in the job ad and use them in your CV or your resume and your cover letter. Okay, cover letters are separate topic, but you do this for that too. So if the job ad lists duties 1, 2, and 3, duty 1 is research, duty 2 is education, duty 3 is engagement. Do not have on your resume research, teaching, and outreach. Have on your resume research, education, and engagement. So you might be rewording your exact experience in the words that they use, or it might be that you are let's say you're about to graduate with your PhD and you've never before thought of yourself as doing any education. You're a TA, but then you start thinking about, well, you volunteered at that event where you were showing hermit crabs to fourth graders or something. You can pull that up into your education and then think about, like, well, did you design any curricula? Did you like evaluate like afterward, were you like, hey, the parents were actually really interested, I think that next year the process we should use is something, something, something. Then all of a sudden what you've done is not just volunteer. Don't put volunteer as the thing that you did. You can start putting like designing educational experiences for elementary students and their parents or something like that. So think critically about what you've done and the experience you have, and you want to structure it exactly as a mirror of what they have in the job ad. I will go so far as to, when I'm looking at a job ad, I will copy and paste the job duties in the order that they're listed in the job ad, and I will make space at the top of my resume, paste them in, and then one by one delete them as I've made sure that I have their words in their priority order. Okay, do the same with my cover letter. So tailor your CV or resume for text upload and machine mutability by using modern PDF software, and use the actual words that they use in the job ad in the order that they use them. Um, the things that I've heard of people doing wrong to not get through the machine reading step is they won't have a high enough percentage of matched words. I have heard of that happening before, where people will get a rejection early in the process and they will I know someone who reached out to HR for a government job, and they said, I think I might have been kicked out because of machine readability and machine match, but a friend, like X person, told me to, recommended that I apply for this job because they thought I'd be a good fit. Is there any way that I could have a person assess my initial fit and maybe make it to the second round? And I think they ended up either getting the job. I know they advanced to the next round. So if it feels like machine readability was the step that got you out, don't be shy to ask for feedback and to ask if a person could review it, because you feel like, make your case to the HR manager, basically. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. What other questions are on your mind? Seeing anything. So hopefully that means y'all are feeling fantastic about your CVs and your resumes and how you're going to move forward from here. Oh, it was super helpful. Jack, thank you for saying so. I'm so glad to hear that. Oh, and I should list as a resource myself. So I do monthly free coaching calls on anything communication related. And if you ever want somebody to review your CV, I often will review CVs and resumes just on the call live. Like, I will look at yours specifically and be like, change this, change this. I would rephrase that. So if you ever want me to look at your stuff, you totally can. A sticker, thank you so much. You're welcome very much. Okay. Eric, I'm going to hand it back to you because I'm not seeing many questions and people are starting to say happy things. So I'm hoping that means we're good.
Yeah, I posted one, but my guess is you've gone over it already. I was just asking about, is there
Oh,
a piece of advice that you wish you'd been given early on, like in developing your CV or resume? But you've probably already given all that advice. But
yeah,
I'll give you a chance
maybe.
to.
Let me think about that specifically though. I think the piece of advice is really that same one about taking control. Because I just didn't realize, yes, okay, but I'm going to rephrase. Because I told people to take control of your titles and your positions and choose your own words and descriptions that go in there, not the ones that your paycheck writers give to you. I think this is actually super important beyond the resume and the CV. Is another way to rephrase that is, it's a total mindset thing. Give yourself permission to be great and to act as if you are great. Because if you don't show up in these documents as somebody who believes in yourself, why should your employer believe in you, right? And I feel like so much of owning the titles is related to whether you own your permission to be there. So for me, especially leaving academia and becoming a freelancer, I had to start making up my titles, and no one was giving me any help with what I could even call myself as a communications freelancer. I didn't want to say communications freelancer, that sounds very legal. So I guess it would be the advice that I wish I'd gotten was not just take control, but like work on my self-esteem and own why I deserved the job. Because then if that comes through, it'll help with that component for why you should get hired.
And it will help for our next webinar on for interviews, crushing your job interview. You kind of got to know
So
that
true.
part to do well in the interview. Um, Shameless plug. I'm going to put the registration link in the chat for the folks who are still on. Thank you so much, Virginia, and please do join us if you haven't already registered for the February 13th webinar on crushing your job interview. Makes sense. That would be the last in the series. And please do reach out to Virginia if you have any questions about what was discussed today, or you want to take her up on that coaching offer. Thanks, Virginia.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, all.